Okay, this is going to be a straight up rallying cry, my friends, because I have emerged from the studio over the last couple of weeks and I've come out here in the world to try to bring reason, evidence, and arguments to essential cultural and political issues. And it is bad out here. It is brutal out here to try and get a message across in a peaceful, positive, engaging, and enjoyable way. The violence, the deplatforming, the hysteria, the verbal abuse, the slander, it is absolutely astonishing to see just how much opposition there is from the anti-rational left to anyone who wants to bring an argument against the falsehoods and the hysteria that they put forward. It is just astonishing. And I am, like every reasonable, decent, peaceful human being, I am trying with all of my might and all of my rhetoric and all of my energy and efforts to stop the war that is coming. This feral escalation of abuse and violence and threats and deplatforming is going to escalate into war. History is very clear on this point. And I don't know if the left knows how much it's going to escalate. I don't know if they want it. I don't know what the hell is going on. But I'm telling you, it's coming. Unless we keep free speech alive, unless we agree to stop using threats and violence, verbal abuse, hysteria, calling people far-right, Nazis, literally Hitlers, unless we can cool that rhetoric, we are going to end up with bayonets pointed at each other's hearts. And we need to prevent that as much as humanly possible. We need to prevent that kind of escalation. I got a question in one of the Q&As in Australia that really struck me in so many different ways and on so many different levels. Somebody came up and said to Lauren and me, where do you get your courage from? Where do you get your courage from? Well, I'll tell you. We get our courage from you. From you. If you're not with us, if you're not helping us, if you're not sharing what we do, if you're not supporting us, if you're not helping us out financially, we can't do what we do. We may be the most visible symbol of a larger movement for peace and reason, but don't mistake us for the movement. The movement is you. The movement is you. We may have a certain amount of eloquence and we may have a certain amount of charisma. We may be up there in front of crowds, but we are merely a reflection of your commitment to peace and reason and virtue. And I want to make that really, really clear. We're all in this together. I don't want you to distance yourself and say, well, they're off doing something and therefore I'm not really part of it. You are part of it. I'm telling you, you are part of it in your personal conversations. You are part of it in what you create, in what you share, in what you talk about, in how deeply you dig in your heels to push back the encroaching mob and horde of mindless violence that the left seems to want to unleash on the failing remnants of civilization. You are part of everything that goes on in the struggle to save what feels like sometimes a truly dying West. And seeing that vividly, seeing that powerfully, it's one thing if you get mean comments. It's another thing if you get mean typing. But it is quite another thing, my friends, let me tell you, it is quite another thing to stand outside a venue full of peaceful, enthusiastic, happy people who want to reason together and see the orc-like claws of the feral left trying to disassemble buses with human beings inside, trying to tip over buses with human beings inside who simply want to come and hear rational arguments, having them hurl things at window shields of buses. It is absolutely astonishing to see the feral power of the headless mob attempting to disassemble a peaceful assembly. It is powerful stuff. And once you see that with your own two eyes, and once you process that with your heart and your mind and your soul, you cannot go back to mere complacency. And that is what we have seen. And we have seen amazing amounts of hysteria coming from the mainstream media, calling us all sorts of absolutely reprehensible and horrifying names and labels designed to get the feral mob to target us. It is an absolutely astonishing thing to see. It's one thing if, you're home and then they write articles and it's like, well, that's not true and so on. But it's another thing when you see the demonic mob that their language summons and points at you, and when you have to go everywhere in a country surrounded by bodyguards. It's an absolutely astonishing thing that you are not free to move about a country, that you are not free to engage with the population, that you're not free to have conversations with the locals without people of large size, stature, and skill surrounding you to protect you from any assembly or individual of a feral mob that might decide to do you one. It is absolutely an astonishing phenomenon to witness, to be aware of, to stare that eye of the beast directly. I really, really want you to be aware of that because, I mean, we all kind of know this deep down. I knew it deep down. I'd seen people experience this kind of stuff, but to actually have it pointed directly at you is truly an astonishing thing. You know, I was aware every moment that I was out in public. I was aware that somebody may recognize me, that a feral mob may gather. Of course, social media, they can all triangulate on your position right away. And in talking about the venues and what was happening with the security guards and the experts, the amount of contingency that was necessary for a violent mob to break into what we were doing is absolutely astonishing. At one point, they even had an exit by boat planned just in case we were overwhelmed. This is what it is like to go out and speak in the world about important ideas. This is what it is like. It requires bodyguards to speak the truth these days. That is a horrifying situation. But I'll tell you this. This kind of opposition has deeply and fundamentally strengthened my resolve to push on, to go further, to speak more clearly, to speak more passionately, and to reach more people. Because having seen this kind of aggression, this kind of violence, this hysterical verbal abuse, having seen this directly and seen the effects of it directly, has only stiffened my spine and strengthened my resolve to do everything that I can to save the peace and reason of the West. Now, to do that, I need you. There is no individual in this movement. There are those with different skill sets. I have a particular verbal skill set, a public speaking skill set, a reasoning skill set that I am happy to use and overjoyed to use in my devotion to peace and reason and discourse. But you have your part to play as well. So I'm going to remind you of that. I'm going to ask for your help. You can provide the help to anyone you think is the most effective at bringing this message to the world. But I am going to ask for your help very clearly and very directly. Having seen what we're up against, I now recognize how many resources we need to bring to bear on this growing demonic mob. And so you can help me out. You can like, subscribe, and share. You can talk about these ideas with people in your life, and don't back down. Don't back down. Say it clear. Say it strong. Say it proud. What it is that you believe in and how opposed you are to the substitution of violence for reasoned discourse. Do not back down. I'm not backing down. I'm in fact going to go even further. This has propelled me to go more deeply and more passionately and more powerfully into my engagement and conversation with the world. Do not falter this cause. Do not fail what is necessary. Because when we fail, if we were to fail, I don't think we will, but if we were to fail, the regret that we would experience when we see the tide of collectivism, anti-rationality, and violence sweeping over the remnants of a formerly great civilization, the amount of regret that we would feel, the amount of self-contempt and not downright self-hatred that we would feel, should we fail, is worse than any difficulty we have in striving to succeed. Recognize that on the other side of failure is self-contempt, self-hatred, and possibly incarceration or death itself. That's what happens when the left gains power. Avoiding that is worth any personal price in the here and now. So I implore you, I beg you, I encourage you, I exhort you. Speak reasonably, speak peacefully, speak forcefully. Do not back down. And please, help me in what I'm doing. There's so many different ways that you can help. You can support me. We lost a venue. Hundreds and hundreds of people who had come a long way and were very passionate to hear this conversation, to engage in what Lauren and I were going to discuss. we lost the venue, and that's costly. It's very expensive. And I need your help. I'll be perfectly frank, I need your help. If you could, please, go to freedomainradio.com/donate to help out what is necessary and what has arisen from this aggression. I would really, really appreciate it. freedomainradio.com/donate. If you've got a PayPal account, it's nice and easy. You've got a Visa, got a MasterCard, got a bank card, nice and easy. You can set up recurring donations, which really help me to plan expenditures in the future. You can take Bitcoin, other altcoins. Really, really appreciate what is necessary for this movement to succeed. We know that the enemy is well funded, and we also know some mechanisms by which they're well funded, and we need to have the resources to do what is necessary to stave off this oncoming disaster. So please, I implore you, help me out. freedomainradio.com/donate, and take heart. Take heart. I was quoted mockingly in the press when I said that there were some potential successes that come out of the cancellation of the speech in New Zealand. The messages that we've been getting, the comments that I've been seeing from people in New Zealand who are shocked and appalled at the stance that the Prime Minister has taken against us, that the other government officials have taken against us. Well, the Prime Minister was head of a youth socialist organization not a decade ago, so that's what you get. It has woken up people to what is going on in this part of the world. We have seen that in Australia. We've seen that in New Zealand. The purpose is to get people to ask questions. The purpose is to get people to break out of their conditioning. The purpose is to get people to start thinking by any means necessary without violence. That we have achieved, but it has been very costly. So once again, I encourage you to fight. I ask for your support. And I thank you for everything you have done that has got me here.
Death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.
And if you thought we still had the internet as a place where we can speak our minds, then I have to disappoint you there also. I have now set up accounts at VidMe, Gab, BitChute and Minds. Anyone making videos like mine can expect to be shut out of the mainstream platforms imminently. So I hope you follow me across to those platforms when the time comes. The US is now a country where you can no longer go onto the streets and speak up for your president and your people without being physically attacked. The US is now a country where the police have no interest in protecting innocent citizens. The US is now a country where bigotry is fashionable if it is against white males. The US is a country that is staring into the abyss right now. I know how difficult it is to hear these words, to witness this madness, but I want you to know that the videos that I make are to prepare you for what is coming, what is already here. Do all that you can to make yourself ready. Work out, eat well, love your family and friends and hold them close. Form a tight unit. We cannot be sure why this is happening, but it certainly seems like the West is being steered into a conflict by those whose job it is to protect us. The enemies of Western civilization are here, and they are being sustained and emboldened by our politicians and media. I will leave you with an unambiguous statement of what they represent. Until next time, be well.
No Trump, no wall, no USA at all. No Trump, no wall, no USA at all. No Trump, no wall, no USA at all. No Trump, no wall, no USA at all.
be disrespecting her culture. Is that not my culture?
You don't have a culture.
I don't?
No, you don't.
Oh.
We're white. We don't have a culture.
This video is centered around an article that one of my subscribers was kind enough to send me recently, so thank you for that. The article is so well written, so poignant, so accurate and conspicuously honest that it would be a mistake for me to just tweet it and for people to ignore it as too long didn't read. So I want to make sure it reaches the larger audience that it deserves. It goes right to the very heart of the treachery that has been committed against the European mind by our governments, and it needs to be heard. Until we have a firm grasp of what ails us as a civilization, we will continue to fight in vain to recover from it. How a Generation Lost Its Common Culture by Patrick Deneen, Professor of Constitutional Studies at Notre Dame. My students are know-nothings. They are exceedingly nice, pleasant, trustworthy, mostly honest, well-intentioned and utterly decent. But their brains are largely empty, devoid of any substantial knowledge that might be the fruits of an education in an inheritance and a gift of a previous generation. They are the culmination of Western civilization, a civilization that has forgotten nearly everything about itself, and as a result has achieved near-perfect indifference to its own culture. It's difficult to gain admissions to the schools where I've taught, Princeton, Georgetown, and now Notre Dame. Students at these institutions have done what has been demanded of them. They are superb test takers. They know exactly what is needed to get an A in every class, meaning that they rarely allow themselves to become passionate and invested in any one subject. They build superb resumes. They are respectful and cordial to their elders, though easygoing if crude with their peers. They respect diversity without having the slightest clue what diversity is, and they are experts in the arts of non-judgmentalism, at least publicly. They are the cream of their generation, the masters of the universe, a generation in waiting to run America and the world. But ask them some basic questions about the civilization they will be inheriting, and be prepared for averted eyes and somewhat panicked looks. Who fought in the Peloponnesian War? Who taught Plato, and whom did Plato teach? How did Socrates die? Raise your hand if you have read both the Iliad and the Odyssey. The Canterbury Tales? Paradise Lost? The Inferno? Who was Saul of Tarsus? What were the 95 Theses? Who wrote them, and what was their effect? Why does the Magna Carta matter? How and where did Thomas Becket die? Who was Guy Fawkes, and why is there a day named after him? What did Lincoln say in his second inaugural? His first inaugural? How about his third inaugural? What are the Federalist Papers? Some students, due most often to serendipitous class choices or a quirky old-fashioned teacher, might know a few of these answers, but most students have not been educated to know them. At best, they possess accidental knowledge, but otherwise are masters of systematic ignorance. It is not their fault for pervasive ignorance of Western and American history, civilization, politics, art and literature. They have learned exactly what we have asked of them, to be like mayflies, alive by happenstance in a fleeting present. Our students' ignorance is not a failing of the educational system, it is its crowning achievement. Efforts by several generations of philosophers and reformers and public policy experts, whom our students, and most of us, know nothing about, have combined to produce a generation of know-nothings. The pervasive ignorance of our students is not a mere accident or unfortunate but correctable outcome, if only we hire better teachers or tweak the reading lists in high school. It is the consequence of a civilizational commitment to civilizational suicide. The end of history for our students signals the end of history for the West. During my lifetime, lamentation over student ignorance has been sounded by the likes of E.D. Hirsch, Alan Bloom, Mark Bauerlein and Jay Leno, among many others. But these lamentations have been leavened with the hope that appeal to our and their better angels might reverse the trend. That's an allusion to Lincoln's first inaugural address, by the way. E.D. Hirsch even worked up a self-help curriculum, a do-it-yourself guide on how to become culturally literate. imbued with the can-do American spirit that cultural defenestration could be reversed by a good reading list in the appendix. Broadly missing is sufficient appreciation that this ignorance is the intended consequence of our educational system, a sign of its robust health and success. We have fallen into the bad and unquestioned habit of thinking that our educational system is broken, but it is working on all cylinders. What our educational system aims to produce is cultural amnesia, a wholesale lack of curiosity, historyless free agents, and educational goals composed of content-free processes and unexamined buzzwords like critical thinking, diversity, ways of knowing, social justice, and cultural competence. Our students are the achievement of a systemic commitment to producing individuals without a past for whom the future is a foreign country, cultureless ciphers who can live anywhere and perform any kind of work without inquiring about its purposes or ends, perfected tools for an economic system that prizes flexibility, geographic, interpersonal, ethical. In such a world, possessing a culture, a history, an inheritance, a commitment to a place and particular people, specific forms of gratitude and indebtedness, rather than a generalized and deracinated commitment to social justice, a strong set of ethical and moral norms that assert definite limits to what one ought and ought not to do, aside from being judgmental, are hindrances and handicaps. Regardless of major or course of study, the main object of modern education is to sand off remnants of any cultural or historical specificity and identity that might still stick to our students, to make them perfect company men and women for a modern polity and economy that penalizes deep commitments. Efforts first to foster appreciation for multiculturalism signaled a dedication to eviscerate any particular cultural inheritance, while the current fad of diversity signals thoroughgoing commitment to decultured and relentless homogenization. Above all, the one overarching lesson that students receive is the true end of education. The only essential knowledge is to know ourselves to be radically autonomous selves within a comprehensive global system with a common commitment to mutual indifference. Our commitment to mutual indifference is what binds us together as a global people. Any remnant of a common culture would interfere with this prime directive. A common culture would imply that we share something thicker, an inheritance that we did not create, and a set of commitments that imply limits and particular devotions. Ancient philosophy and practice praised as an excellent form of government a res publica, a devotion to public things, things we share together. We have instead created the world's first res idiotica, from the Greek word idiotes, meaning private individual. Our education system produces solipsistic, self-contained selves whose only public commitment is an absence of commitment to a public, a common culture, a shared history. They are perfectly hollowed vessels, receptive and obedient, without any real obligations or devotions. They won't fight against anyone because that's not seemly, but they won't fight for anyone or anything either. They are living in a perpetual Truman Show, a world constructed yesterday that is nothing more than a set for their solipsism without any history or trajectory. I love my students. Like any human being, each has enormous potential and great gifts to bestow upon the world. But I weep for them, for what is rightfully theirs but hasn't been given. On our best days, I discern their longing and anguish, and I know that their innate human desire to know who they are, where they have come from, where they ought to go, and how they ought to live will always reassert itself. But even on those better days, I can't help but hold the hopeful thought that the world they have inherited, a world without inheritance, without past, future, or deepest cares, is about to come tumbling down, and that this collapse would be the true beginning of a real education. So that's the end of the article. Our job as a movement is to shine a light on the troubles of our people, and there is no greater trouble than the enforced amnesia, as detailed in the article, of who we Europeans really are. We live in a society where dependence on two incomes has made it a rare thing indeed for a man to be able to support his family and have his wife homeschool their children. So school is now as much of a babysitting service as it is anything else. Weakening parental influence over the lives of children has perhaps been the greatest victory of the modern, multicultural, globalist state. To this add an anti-white media and political culture, feminism and political correctness, and you have a toxic mix indeed for any semblance of white identity. Our children are taught to respect the identity of others and pay no attention to their own. They are taught that they are not of a certain tribe, or that their tribe is so potentially evil that even to talk of it is to revive the spectres of the past. What our children are missing is an education about who they are, who we are, where we come from and where we need to be going. In short, they are being taught not to be themselves but to be global citizens, to be uniform workers who serve a nameless, formless creed of consumerism and diversity, to be people divorced from their ancestors and who teach the new culture of conformity to their offspring, to be people who consider curiosity a social indelicacy and the discussion of awkward truths social suicide, to be people at ease in a world where the only contrasting shades come in the form of the rainbow banner of mandatory tolerance. I have said many times that if you don't play identity politics will play you. And I think this is such an important truth for us to understand. I really hope Jordan Peterson is watching this. I really hope Sargon is watching this. This modern obsession with individualism is a completely inadequate response to the perils of the modern era. It is like trying to put out a fire with petrol. And this is a uniquely Western affliction. And Sargon et al. Are doing a terrible disservice to our people by luring them further into this trap of disconnection and isolation. To see the absolute lunacy of where these so-called liberalists are, I want to play you a short clip of a recent event at which Sargon was a panel member.
It's very difficult because, I mean, Jewish people do very well in our societies. You know, they're often, and that's to their credit, they work hard. You know, it's not that this is illegitimately gained, but then I can see why people are resentful that successful, rich, well-off people who are well-connected, who are socially very advanced, are then playing the game of identity politics as well. I can see why it doesn't seem fair. You know, it seems like an unfair defense, an unfair advantage that they have. And that's not a common... like, if someone would say, well, that's an anti-Semitic thing to say, it would sound to me like someone criticizing feminism being called a misogynist. You know, to me, it's just another brand of identity politics. But it's not an indictment of Jewish people. It's not suggest that they've done, you know, nothing wrong by playing identity politics. Everyone, I think, is playing identity politics, is doing something wrong inherently. But it is an issue that I think a lot of people do notice. And I think it is something that has to have an honest conversation regarding it. They've got to be honest. You can't just shout people down when they point this out, because it is a real thing they're pointing out. Jewish people are very smart. They work very hard. Of course they're successful. If we want to even have any idea that we're living in a meritocracy, if Jews weren't succeeding in our societies, they must be being held back. But they're not. They're doing great because they're not being held back, because they do work hard, because they are smart. We need Jewish people, unfortunately for them, have got to drop the identity politics. I'm sorry about the Holocaust, but I don't give a shit. I'm sorry.
The ignorance and arrogance of this clip are truly breathtaking. From where does he get the moral authority to tell anyone to cease being a loyal member of their ethnic group? And why would any successful ethnicity with a strong in-group preference want to trade its success for the delusion that collective identity doesn't matter? I think Alan Dershowitz has something to tell us about the likely response to such a proposition.
People say Jews are too powerful, we're too strong, we're too rich, we control the media, we have too much this, we have too much that. And we often apologetically deny our strength and our power. Don't do that. Don't do that. We have earned the right to influence public debate. We have earned the right to be heard. We have contributed disproportionately to the success of this country. Never, ever apologize for using our strength and our influence in the interest of peace. And if you need a biblical source for it, just remember the psalmist who said, Hashem oz li'amo yitain. God will give the Jewish people strength, oz. And then, only then, Hashem yivarech et amo b'shalom. Only then will God give the Jewish people peace. Peace will come for the Jewish people and the Jewish nation only through strength. Never apologize for using your strength for peace. Thank you.
So whose vision of the political future do you think will prevail? The collective culture, history and identity of the European peoples are the bedrock upon which this radical individualism rests. How bad do things have to get for Europeans before they realize that this obsession with the individual is the very thing that has created the vacuum at the heart of our civilization? For the answer to that question, I will refer back to Patrick Deneen's article, and I quote, "I can't help but hold the hopeful thought that the world they have inherited, a world without inheritance, without past, future or deepest cares, is about to come tumbling down, and that this collapse would be the true beginning of a real education." Until next time, be well.
How can we ensure that Democrats get things done if they have that level of power in the future?
So when we flip the House and flip the Senate, I think the first thing we should do is deal with the children who are being separated from their families at the border. We should, I think we should get rid of ICE, looking at immigration as a humanitarian issue. Immigration is our strength. It is our diversity is what makes this country and our economy so strong. I think we should pass the gun reform issues within the first month, all of them.
I love that.
Now, with such a controversial title, I should begin this video with some clarifications. When I say women weaken nations, I'm not saying that women are not essential for a nation's survival or well-being. Of course they are. Women bear the children for the nation's future and survival, and they bring essential balance and nurturing to the life of a people. And neither am I saying that women cannot have brilliant and satisfying careers in whatever field they have talent for. And it is also true that there are some talented female nationalists who are making an important contribution to our cause. But my point is that, regardless of outliers, which always exist, there are key differences between men and women. And any healthy nation must maintain this tricky balance between masculine and feminine to stay strong and healthy. The modern West has lost sight of this, and just look at the results. Here is a clip that perfectly illustrates my concerns about the current role women are playing in the West and how men are enabling them.
But I don't want a man's life to be taken away just because you don't want to miss your flight.
Can you please turn it off first of all? Because now you are an unruly passenger. You are not doing what you have to do on board. Okay?
I'm doing what I can to save a person's life. As long as a person is standing up, and if more people are standing up, then the pilots can't take off. So all I want to do is to stop the deportation, and then I will comply with the rules here. This is all perfectly legal, and I have not committed a crime. I'm trying to stop it.
It's your country's rules.
Yeah, I'm trying to change my country's rules. I don't like them. It's not right to send people to hell.
But you're preventing all these passengers to going their destination.
Yeah, but they're not going to die. He's going to die.
How do you know that?
Because it's Afghanistan. The Turkish guy helping me out and telling me that what he's doing is right?
We are with you.
He's with me.
Also
with him. And some people are really applauding all this that I'm doing. They're taking his bags out, so I'm just waiting for the flight attendant to make me say that it's okay for me to go at the back of the plane to go out.
So this young woman, in her self-righteousness, in her complete ignorance of who this deportee was, the details of his failed application, or what he may have done, chooses to ground the plane, disrupting the entire airport and hundreds of passengers just so she can be a human rights crusader for a day and get her 15 minutes of fame. Doubtless she would have done the same thing if these men were being deported. But don't worry, Elin. These child rapists from Africa are being allowed to stay in Sweden. So why could no one take control of the situation and simply remove her from the plane? Why did the world have to stop turning because some SJW woman got upset? Because the dominant role of women in public life has normalized and encouraged this kind of emotionality over rational analysis, informed debate, and the rule of law. Men are guilty of enabling this. What we are witnessing here is the utter chaos brought about by the disconnection of European peoples from their nations and physical and cultural survival. To be a leftist today is to automatically assume that someone with a brown skin is innocent and that someone white in a position of authority is abusing it. The West is dying through a lack of balance in the natural order. When women play such a key role in determining the agenda for our civilization, and when men are so weakened that they do not balance that, we are a ship heading for the rocks. Because there is precious little respect, balance, or understanding between the sexes today, they have become locked in a battle for dominance rather than existing in equilibrium. Spurred on by disruptive, globalist, and leftist interests, femininity is winning this battle, but the fight back has begun. In broad terms, men and women certainly think differently on average. As far as the reasons why they do is concerned, the research splits into 3 basic areas: biological, cognitive, and socio-cultural. And there is certainly scientific evidence of sexual differences in each of these areas, but regardless of the reason for the difference, what really matters is that there is a difference. Naturally, globalists don't like nationalism, and this is why you are seeing the steady corruption of femininity and the destruction of gender norms, creating the most bizarre of worlds where phrases like "not all women have vaginas" are common. In this documentary, the BBC found one of the last entirely white schools in England to try to indoctrinate some children into believing that there are no differences between boys and girls. It's being marketed under the hashtag "No More Boys and Girls." Just imagine if they had tried to get away with this in a Muslim school. Leftists might be crazy, but they're not suicidal. What we see in this program is the left, as it always does, try to manipulate the children to conform to its vision of how the world should be, not how it is, just like it did in the Soviet Union, Mao's China, and the many other societies it brought to bloody destruction. By showing the children exceptional cases of female mechanics and male makeup artists, they are trying to fool the children into believing that these things are the norm, and that, if they have natural, traditional inclinations, to think they are baseless. They say in the program that men's and women's brains have exactly the same structure, but this is simply not true, and they don't address the size difference, and they won't acknowledge the role of the different sex hormones. The program is well worth a watch, if only to see how frustrated the presenter, Dr. Javid Abdelmonaim, becomes when the girls and boys just aren't the same. Of course, the one hypothesis that never occurs to Dr. Abdelmonaim is that boys and girls are just different. This is child exploitation and abuse. This is typical BBC. It's typical leftism masquerading, very badly, as science. Men's and women's roles are completely equal in importance and should be valued and respected as such. In our demented modern world, equality has come to mean that women should want to be engineers or soldiers, and that men should want to stay at home and look after the kids or become nurses. But even when they choose to have careers, women make very different choices to men, which befit their natural inclinations and talents. The fact is that no matter how much social engineering the left tries, it can't make engineers out of women in any significant number. When women do try to enter STEM fields, for example, they often find that they are simply unsuited to these ways of thinking. They get depressed and frustrated. Maybe their abilities in these areas can be improved with practice, but that is not the same as natural inclinations or preferences. Nursing has always been dominated by women and engineering by men. It's a sad, long, and painful lesson our civilization is being taught right now, that the sexes are simply different. Even more important are the different voting patterns between the sexes. We know that in every Western country from the US to Sweden, voting patterns between the sexes are remarkably consistent. If only men voted, we would likely never have a social democratic government ever again. And if only women voted, goodbye nationalism forever. It is no coincidence that nationalism is dominated by men and that women play a much bigger role in open borders movements like the Green Party. These voting patterns reflect the natural roles the sexes play. Men are more cautious and given to the protection of the tribe and the borders of the country, while women favour the more nurturing, trusting and open approach to people. The left wants us to equate equality with sameness, but this is deranged. Of course, men and women should have the opportunity to do what they want with their lives. So I'm not talking about compulsion of any kind. I'm talking about ending the creepy, politically correct obsession that there can be no differences between the sexes. I'm talking about reviving the role of the housewife and mother as the most valuable and prestigious thing most women can do with their lives. Because it's true. I'm talking about allowing the sexes to be themselves, to abandon the idea that men should be more feminine and that masculinity is toxic. This is, quite literally, a matter of our nation's life or death. When women buy into the lie that they do not need to rush into having children, what they are really buying into is the idea that it's something akin to doing that night class in Japanese or flower arranging, nothing particularly important and something that they can always do next year. There's always some more fun you can have before then, right? And this is perhaps the single biggest cause of Europeans' demographic decline. We have bought into the notion that all that matters is our own gratification, and that commitment is a dirty word. Does any of this mean that women should not be in positions of authority and involved in politics? I don't think so. But I think it necessary for any stable Western state to have laws in place to maintain the inviolability of the nation's borders and the host population's supermajority. When a woman has huge power over a country and a continent, you get Merkel, and it remains my hope that she will stand trial for the chaos she has wrought in Germany and throughout Europe. Women and men in any position of authority, particularly when shaping young minds, should be strictly limited in what they can pass on. Here again we see child abuse to prove a political point that open borders are a good thing. This simply has to be stopped. The thing is, nature abhors a vacuum. Just like our own bodies, if our society gets out of balance, it gets sick. And what you are seeing now is the process of nature filling that vacuum. If so many of our women are no longer capable of fulfilling their primary role in society as mothers and carers, and if our feminized men are no longer capable of asserting themselves and bringing balance, then nature will find other tribes who will. We can see the process has begun. Here is a video showing what these empowered women's future holds if they keep supporting the importation of people who take a rather more primitive view on their standing in society. Be careful what you wish for, ladies. Nature will fill the vacuum, one way or another. Until next time, be well.